So, John, let me take you back to your childhood. Can't
remember it, all right? Will that do?
Your dad was a French polisher and your mum was a hairdresser.
Correct.
Sounds like a traditional working class upbringing.
Yep, it was, and they both mostly worked from home. Well, my mum did, because there were 5 kids, and my mum did her hairdressing in the kitchen. The ladies, the neighbours mostly, came to her, and my father did a lot of his French polishing in the kitchen as well, because we didn't have a garage or workshop or anything like that. And sometimes he went to the client's home and did it there, but sometimes it had to come to us. So my childhood was quite literally a childhood of awful smells. The smell in the case of my mother, obviously, the stuff they used for perms.
Yes.
You're far too young to remember that, Gloria, but by God, it was a bad smell. And my father used all sorts of stuff, including a fierce kind of acid thing called, well, it was called oxalic acid. It was a kind of bleach. And if the piece of furniture was badly stained or something, or they wanted it to be a different colour or whatever, he boiled this stuff. He used to buy it from the chemist and boil it on the stove in the kitchen, or in a sort of baked beans can or something, and it got into the back of your throat. I don't know why I'm still alive, really. I'm very baffled by that. It was horrible.
Was it a political household at all?
Politics was a dirty word, and I mean that literally. It would be a bit like saying one of the neighbours is pregnant. My mother wouldn't allow the word pregnant. She'd sort of make a little face and say, she's, and that from that you took it that she was probably pregnant or something. But there were lots of words that were never used, like sex, obviously, and politics. No, nobody was allowed to talk. My father occasionally went on a bit of a rant. And that was it. But no, not political. We didn't sit around. I mean, don't get the idea that because you've had a working class background yourself, haven't you? And some of them, you sit around the table and you talk politics for hours on end. And not like that at all. I mean, you sat around the table in order to eat, and that was it. And then you got up and got on with what you were doing. So no politics, not allowed. I was born in Splot and lived in the house in which I was born for the first 13 years of my life. And Splot, well, Splot was exactly what you'd expect it to be like with a name like that. It's not like Mayfair, is it? Splot. It sounds like something you've done rather unpleasantly. And yeah, it was basically we call it slums now, I suppose, outdoor lavatories and all that sort of thing. But yes, I grew up in Splot.
I'm guessing everybody in that part of the world would have voted Labour at that time.
You'd probably be right, but we absolutely did not vote Labour, or rather they, my parents, absolutely did not vote. That was another one of those sort of dirty words, really. You didn't say Labour, or if you did, you'd say, she's Labour. It would be sort of whispered in horror. No, my father was a working class Tory, and they were profoundly suspicious of the Labour Party. And he was a working class Tory because he was self-employed. He'd had a pretty rough childhood, a very rough childhood. He went blind because of measles when he was about 13. He lost his sight completely for a while. It came back gradually, but never properly. And he was a stroppy little bugger. Well, he was stroppy all his life. I think that's where I got it from, really, possibly. And he liked a good quarrel. And sometimes when he was a younger man, it got to be more than a good quarrel, and he only ever had one job in his life once he'd finished his apprenticeship as a French polisher, and that one job lasted a week, because at the end of the week, towards the end of the week, he'd had a row with the foreman and punched him on his nose, and that was it. He never worked for anybody ever again, and he made a living by setting up his own little one-man business, and we kids used to tramp the streets of the posh bits of Cardiff, sticking leaflets through the door saying, do you want some French polishing done? If so, George Humphreys is the man to go to. And that was how he made his living.
Now, you passed the 11 plus, but you didn't really fit in at grammar school or excel academically. Is that right?
Yeah, both of those are right. Look, a lot is said about grammar school for poor kids, and we didn't call them grammar schools in those days, of course, we call them high schools, and a lot of it is true. But what tends not to be said, certainly for the kind of school that I went to, which was the poshest in Cardiff, outside private schools, obviously, but in terms of state schools, it was probably academically the best in. Well, no, it was academically the best in Wales. It was a very upmarket school, and the headmaster, a chap called George Diamond, God rot his soul, took that terribly seriously. He was a snob. There were not many poor kids. I was, I suppose, the only poor kid in my particular class in my year, and he basically didn't like poor kids really. You know, if you weren't middle class, you barely registered on his graph at all.
Did that make you angry, chippy?
Yeah, very, very, very. I had a chip on my shoulder. I had a chip on both shoulders, so I suppose I was balanced in that sense. No, it did make me angry. One incident in particular, which I still recall rather childishly to this day. We had no money, as I say, so I used to do lots of jobs when I was in school, like delivering newspapers morning and evening, and then working for the local chemist delivering stuff. And it was a very, very nasty winter's morning one day, and the newspapers weren't delivered at the shop in time, so I was late for school. Now, you would think, wouldn't you, that if you said to your headmaster, I'm sorry I'm late, but I had to deliver the papers because, we need the money, and the papers, so it wasn't my fault, really, it's not as if I was swanning off to, but he wasn't interested in that, so he gave me a beating, and I shall never forgive him for that. How childish is that? He's been dead about 40 years.
So you leave school and you go into local journalism, and then you join the BBC.
I left school at 15. I joined a little local newspaper in Penarth, a little seaside town a few miles from Cardiff. I joined that paper. I left school on the Friday, and I joined that paper on the Monday as a so-called trainee reporter. I mean, I like the idea of trainee reporters. Those are a great team of reporters. There was one other reporter. So I was a reporter, I was a sub, I was a deliverer of newspapers. I helped break the printers' strike, by which that meant that I stood at the sort of machine where we were trying to run off copies of papers. One of my jobs was to squirt water from a flit gun, what we used to use to kill flies with. I used to stand alongside this printing thing while we rolled off strike-breaking copies of the Penarth Times. I'm not sure whether I should have been proud of that or ashamed of it, really. But anyway, that's what I did when I was 15.
Do you feel proud or ashamed?
Bit of both, I suppose, really. It was a stupid strike. There were only 3 printers, for God's sake. It was only a tiny operation. And I can't remember now why they went on strike, but they weren't particularly fussed about it, and they came back in the end, and it all sort of went away. I don't think anybody noticed, really.
So tell me, how old were you when you joined the BBC, and in what capacity did you join the BBC?
I joined the BBC, having worked for independent television for a couple of years, TWW or HTV as it became. I joined the BBC as the Northwest correspondent. We didn't have one. It meant basically the Liverpool reporter. I was based in Liverpool, and I covered the Northwest, up to Blackpool, up to the English border and across to Manchester and all that. That was my patch. So it was a one-man band. I was the first one to do it. So I set up this rather nice little operation, and it was great. Lots of stuff going on, dock strikes mostly, obviously, but the Beatles and you name it. It was a brilliant news patch.
Were people from background like yours a minority when you joined the BBC?
I didn't know anybody else like me, put it like that. Mostly they were university-educated people, obviously. And then when I eventually came down to London, I think they were pretty much all university people. So no, I was fairly unusual, I suppose.
And I'm guessing it would have been around that time that you would have had your first vote in a general election.
Well, I voted when I was 18, and I voted Labour. Well, only because my parents voted Tory, obviously. I mean, that's what you did in those days, isn't it? Yeah, I voted. I think I voted Labour for quite a long time. I was abroad for many, many years, so long patches. But look, I voted everything in mind. Well, that's not strictly true. I've never actually... Did I vote Liberal? I might have voted Liberal once in the early days. And I've definitely voted Green. I voted for the bloody lot, really. As you may have gained from that, Gloria, I'm not ideological.
How long since you last voted Labour? Is it a long time?
I can't remember. it'll be a long time. Yeah, it'll be quite a long time, I think. But I can't remember.
Well, something that you will remember then is the referendum. I know you were quite critical of the BBC at that time. You complained in hindsight that they didn't see it coming. Did you vote leave?
No, I voted Remain, and felt fairly strongly about it. But obviously, well, I hope it didn't show. I did my job, I hope, which is to question both sides with equal vim and vigour and all the rest of it. But I was. I'd always been hugely enthusiastic for the concept of the common market as it was originally, obviously. Why would you not? I was born during the war. If you grew up in the post-war years, you saw, I was going to say at first hand, obviously not at first hand, but you saw through your relatives and neighbours who'd suffered in the war, and we came close. I mean, our house was only a few doors away from a house that was bombed flat. You saw what war does. As a child, you saw what war does. And I believed then, without any doubt at all, that one of the ways to stop it happening again was to join this wonderful organisation where all the countries in Europe would be friends and France would never be invaded by Germany again, and so on. And that was what drove me to vote Remain, I suppose, remnants of that.
When I first met you, I should tell our listeners, I was one of your researchers like many moons ago.
You were. Very good one too.
We'd had a big general election when I came to work with you at the BBC. It was the 1997 landslide.
Yes, Tony Blair's triumph.
Did you vote for Tony Blair?
I did. I'm pretty sure I did. Yes, I would have done. Yeah. As I said, I might have said earlier, I'm not exactly ideological. I don't have a particular party. I have a set of beliefs in all sorts of different things, and they cross the party lines. So if I sound a bit sort of iffy about who I voted for and when, that's why. It depends what the party is standing for. It depends who the leader is. I thought Blair was a very impressive figure, spoke a lot of sense. Obviously, was not hardline Labour, certainly was not of the far left, that's for sure. And yeah, I had no hesitation about voting for Blair.
So I'm guessing by that statement, you're not a big fan of the hard left. So you didn't vote for Corbyn, obviously.
No.
So Cameron and Johnson?
I am now struggling. No, I didn't vote for Johnson. I've not been a fan of Johnson. I think I did one of those slightly silly things like voting Green, because you can't decide what to. I mean, you've got to vote, haven't you? But I couldn't bring myself to vote for Corbyn. And I'm afraid I am not a fan of Boris Johnson. I could say that now. Gosh, I couldn't say that a year ago.
Why not?
Oh, come on. You know all the reasons better than I do. Much better than I do. You have far greater knowledge of politics than I do. I don't trust him. Apart from anything else, I don't trust him. And you have to be able to trust politicians. There's a lovely old Welsh expression, but I'm not allowed to use it because this is public broadcasting. But he's full of something and wind. And he's great at the bluster bit, but he's not so good when it comes to delivering. His background is, for somebody like me particularly, I suppose somebody like me in a sense, as working class boy and all that, is anathema. He had all the benefits, all the advantages of going to the finest school in the world, if that's what Eton really is, and all the rest of it, and a wonderful university and all the rest of it. I can't quite see what he gained from all that. I just, he's not a man I hugely admire, let's put it like that.
And when people think of you and what you think of politicians, because of the nature of your interviewing style, integrative, forensic, but people assume you don't like politicians. I'm not sure that's right. Go on.
Oh, it's complete rubbish. Of course I like Do I like politicians? Do I like hairdressers? Do I like carpenters or plumbers or whatever, or judges or whatever? Of course I like politicians in the sense that they're people. You were one. And you always seem to me to be a pretty normal kind of person. And I didn't notice the horns and tails. Perhaps I never looked at you closely enough when we were working together. But no, how can you not like politicians? I mean, they're people. And some of them are jolly good people who go into politics to try to make the world a better place. And some of them are tossers, just like the rest of the human race. So how can you not like politicians? It's balmy to say something like that.
John, it's Tom.
Tom.
Which politicians do you like then? Who's your favourite politician in your 30 Years to Today programme of interviewing?
Oh, I don't think you can do that. You didn't really expect me to, did you? But
I'd
I don't think you
hoped.
can do that. I mean, I can give you a type of politician, and obviously I now speak in part as somebody who went into regular battle with them, well, not every day of the week, but an awful lot of the time. And there are people like Ken Clarke, David Blunkett, and David Davis, and, you name it.
They're all working class.
Funny that. Odd you should say that. How about John Prescott? Oops, no, working class as well. But there you go. I suppose there is a part of me that thinks, actually, let me add one to that list, who is, I don't think, working class, Michael Heseltine. But what does unite them is that they all, I think, this is maybe just my naivety, but I think when you do an interview or did an interview with them, there was a reasonably good chance that they would try to answer the question if it was a reasonable and sensible question, and you could have a proper discussion with them. It's the other sort of politician that I don't like, those who come over all la-di-da, and, it's all this sort of, I think what the people who did really want to know is so-and-so, and then they're off on one of the, that I can't be doing with that. Those that I've just named, and of course lots of others, do make an effort, or did make an effort to answer the questions, and you felt had a degree of integrity about them, and believed or said what they believed rather than said what they thought would impress the audience. That's the qualifying factor.
So you've interviewed every Prime Minister from Margaret Thatcher onwards. Who was your favourite Prime Minister?
Before her, yeah, absolutely.
Before her.
Yeah, I've done 11, I think. Yeah, I think it's 11. Yeah, it is 11.
And which did you most enjoy, and who are you most in awe of?
Oh, most in awe of, I suppose. Sorry, a bit cliched, I know, but there you go. And that had to be Thatcher, just because she was in the pre-media training days, and we all know about the media training phenomenon that happened a few years back, and she was before that lot. And anybody who'd told her, Prime Minister, now when you do this interview with Humphreys, you must do this, that and the other, she just said, go away, or something similar to that. So I liked her. I liked the fact that she was totally, well, I was going to say straightforward. Of course not. No politician can afford to be totally straightforward. That's a ridiculous notion. But I think she did, when you were interviewing her, you had the sense that she was operating more on instinct than devious calculation. She said what she thought. And sometimes that was, from her perspective, that worked out well. Sometimes it didn't work out so well. But I think from the point of view of the listener, you pretty much always got something from her. I remember trying to be frightfully clever with her on one occasion. It was the first time I did a proper interview with her as Prime Minister. I was new on the Today programme, and the economy was in a mess and all the rest of it. And I thought, I got this interview, and I was wetting myself. I knew how fearsome she was, and I thought, instead of doing the usual first question about the state of the economy or whatever it was, I would ask her about herself and her beliefs, which I did. And the way I phrased it was, what is the essence of Christianity? Fully expecting her, stupid mistake this always, isn't it?
How profound.
Fully expecting. Well,
very profound.
Not as it turned out. I made the mistake of assuming what her second answer would be, her answer to that question would be, and then building the rest of the interview around it. And I knew that she would say the essence of Christianity. What would normal people say? They would say something like love or charity, wouldn't they? So I knew what my riposte would be. I knew how I would deal with that. I would say very vehemently, you talk about love, you talk about charity, look at the state of the country, children going to school without any shoes on their feet, and all this sort of thing. And she would collapse, and she would resign on the spot, and I would become the hero of a grateful nation. That's how I planned the whole thing out. And of course, it did not work out like that. I said to her, Prime Minister, what is the essence of Christianity? She did not hesitate for a millisecond, and she snapped back, choice. And I thought, oh, shit. I didn't recover from that. I don't think I ever did recover from that.
I think you
dozens of times.
You didn't have a bad 30 years after then. So
I survived.
In your time, every time you've interviewed a Labour politician, they've briefed about you being a horrible Tory. Every time you've interviewed a Tory politician, given them a hard time, they said he's a horrible lefty.
Good.
You take
Good.
that as a point of pride, do you? That you got condemnation from all sides.
Oh, I think that's excellent. I mean, it is. We are meant to be in this trade, aren't we? And golly, you've both done it for a long time. When we are meant to be, us hacks are meant to be devil's advocates. That's what we do. We don't say to the minister, just how good is that wonderful new policy? Obviously, we don't. We try to find out what the flaws in the policy may or may not be and put that to the minister. And if the minister or whoever, leader of the opposition, whatever, refuses to answer it, then you chase them a wee bit. And if they are being very, very silly, you point out one way or the other to the audience, or try to, that they are being very, very silly. And if that makes you disliked by both sides, that's fine.
We're coming to the end of this fascinating chat. I want to ask you, do you think that somebody from your background could become the lead presenter on Radio 4's flagship news programme today?
Literally, no, because you can't leave school at 15 any longer, as I did. More sensibly, probably not, because you've got to go to university, haven't you? I mean, nowadays, an awful lot of kids learn, and I put the word in inverted commas, their journalism doing media studies at some university or other. I think that's a complete waste of time. Media studies, that is, you have to learn on the job. But I think realistically, they will almost certainly have been to university, if not to private school before that, and probably a decent university to boot, because there aren't that many jobs of that sort going. So I think it's fairly unlikely.
John, one more from me. How do you plead to the accusation levelled your way, countless of times, that you're very aggressive interviewing style, your constant interruptions, coarsen the debate, turn people off politics unnecessarily, and worsen the body politic?
I think it's a reasonable charge to make, but it's wrong. I don't think that's what I did. I did not constantly interrupt people. I interrupted them, politicians. I interrupted them when I thought that they were about to embark or were already embarked on a party political broadcast, and that's not what they're on.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that is interruption.
Well, but then you've just interrupted me quite. I mean, you make the point perfectly validly. I mean, a silly interruption, if I may say so, Tom. But
you may.
But I may. And they often did to me as well. No, you've got to. Of course you've got to. It's a conversation, for heaven's sake. It's a conversation. So you will interrupt. Of course you will interrupt. You don't ask the question and then wait in respectful silence until you're absolutely certain that they have finished it. If you did, in a 10-minute interview, you get through about 3 questions with a competent politician. So of course you can't do that. You have to interrupt them sometimes. Does it put people off politics? I suppose it might with some people, but let me say this in my own defence. When I and this isn't me claiming that this is a direct result of my involvement with the programme, but when I joined the Today programme nearly 34 years ago now, the audience was, I think it was 4.7 million or something, and when I left it was 7.2 or 7.3 million. Now, that doesn't suggest to me that people are put off listening because the politicians get a pretty rough ride. I think an awful lot of people want them to have a rough but fair, that's the crucial bit, a rough but fair ride. And I think that's what I did. I tried to anyway.
We always finish these interviews by trying to categorise somebody's politics, the person that we've interviewed's politics. And me and Tom, you're tricky. So me and Tom have been scribbling separate notes. And so we're both going to have a go at this. And we might both be wrong. And you won't hesitate to tell us if we are. So I'm going to say you are a left-leaning, class-conscious, floating voter.
Yeah, I disagree slightly. I think you're a working-class, non-ideological, floating voter, politician skeptic.
I'd have to go with Tom, I'm afraid. That's not bad. That's not bad. The thing about yours is Gloria, is that left-leaning. Sometimes I am, sometimes I'm not. That's the problem.
Maybe anti-establishment. That was another one. Maybe I should have gone with that.
Anti-establishment.
I should have gone with that one,
no,
Tom.
Yes.
No. Yeah.
Anti-establishment, 100%.
Stop interrupting each other.
I am instinctively, blame my father for this if you like, although I don't go around punching people on the nose, but anti-establishment, yes.
John Humphreys,
Yeah.
It has been such a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you both.